Thank you very much. Thank you for your interest in sex in plants. But before we get into that, I thought I'd just link up with Sophie's talk. Shorts, second hand, $2. Toft's Warehouse, down towards Sumner. New Zealand shot socks, about 30 years old. The last time I talked about this, I think Caleb said I'm retired. I am retired. So the last time I talked about this was about 9 years ago. So I hope it's still up here. It was to students in the first year class. They had their drinks the night before, not a few minutes before. And it took me about 5 hours to cover sexual reproduction, in other words, what we call life cycles in a whole range of plants. So if I'm still talking after 2 hours, please drag me off. Right, before we get going, I just want to sound out my audience and see what your knowledge is about sex in plants. I've got a few plant structures. Anything to do with sex in plants? Is it?
Easy, doctor.
Come
Yes.
on. A special purpose plant organ. It's a root. That's a root. Nothing to do with sex in plants. How about these? What we got here? These? Anything to do with sex in plants?
Yes. Yes.
In what way?
They produce new plants.
They do. Well, yeah, they do. But these are what we call vegetative organs, vegetative reproduction. They're the swollen ends of underground stems, potatoes. What else have we got in the bag? Oh, what's this? Bag of flour. Anything to do with sex in plants? What's flour? Ground up seeds of wheat. Well, actually, fruits of wheat. So, yeah, something to do with sex in plants. And it's one of the reasons why I think this topic's of importance, because, of course, plants still, despite our efforts, they still dominate life on Earth. It's good to know what they do, how they grow, how they reproduce. We eat them, we clothe ourselves in them. So it's good to know something about their basic biology, I reckon. Basic biology. Bottle of beer. Anything to do with sex in plants. What's beer? A good lubricant for something. What do you make it from? Barley. What are barley grains? The fruits. And fruits are part of the life cycle, as I hope we'll see if we get to the end. Because I'm behind on time already, and here we've got, what's this? Can of tomatoes? Can of tomatoes, definitely something to do with sex in plants. And tomatoes, they're not vegetables, they're fruits, and a particular type of fruit called a berry. And fruits are part of the life cycle of flowering plants, if we get to those. So let's get going. I'm going to have to go quite fast, and there's going to be a lot of terminology, but don't worry about the terminology. You won't remember any of it. You can look it up afterwards. So we're getting going. I thought I'd remind you, that's all on the screen. I thought I'd remind you about the human life cycle to start with. So there's dad and mum. We are what we call diploid. We've got two sets of chromosomes. One set comes from dad, one set comes from mum. Diploid, two sets of chromosomes. Some of our cells undergo this cell division called meiosis. Now, I don't know what you think sex is, but I recognise sex as being meiosis and then fertilisation. So meiosis is a special type of cell division, and it shuffles up the genes. So all the genes from your mums and dads are all shuffled up, and then those shuffled up genes go into the sex cells, which are called gametes. I'll use the pointer. Yeah, that's a good idea. Bit high tech for me. Gametes. So the males produce the sperm, mum produces an egg. Somehow the sperm reaches the egg and fertilises it. So you go back to this diploid stage. So this is a diploid cell. What does that grow into? Oh, here we go. Diploid and haploid. Diploid, 2 sets of chromosomes. Haploid, 1 set of chromosomes. You got it? Good. Okay. That diploid cell becomes the kids, and the kids grow up and they become parents. Dead simple. That's humans. Now think of humans as plants. Now in the modern liberal world where there are lots of different genders, this is all okay now. Because, you'll hope so, you've got this diploid stage, which we'll have to call it. Because it, if you were it as a plant, you'd undergo meiosis, diploid to haploid, all those genes get muddled up. So all the spores, you produce lots of spores that all have different genes in them. So you get diversity. And the spores are haploid and they grow up into the kids. But the poor old kids are haploid. But maybe they have the fun actually because the kids grow up. And then what do? The haploid stage produces the sex cells, which are the gametes. Male produces the sperm, female produces the egg. And you get fertilization. There's sex, there's sex, there's sex. Fertilization, novel genes, a new combination of genes produces an it, a diploid it, which grows up. So that is a plant life cycle. That's what you've got to remember for the test at the end. This plant life cycle is called an alternation of generations. A diploid generation called a sporophyte, which produces spores following meiosis, and a gametophyte generation, I'll use this complicated, gametophyte generation, which produces the sex cells, the gametes. Alternation of generations. Remember that, you're spot on 100%. Right, okay. Now, originally I was going to cover the life cycles of all those, but some sensible person up in management said less is more. So, I'm not covering this one, and this one. I'm going to cover the green algae and the flowering plants. And I've put them all on this diagram because this shows evolution. An ancestral green algae about 1 billion years ago developed into all the green algae today. Green algae about, what's that, 500 million years ago, 475 million years ago, mosses evolved, then ferns, then conifers, then flowering plants. But the theme is that as evolution developed, reproduction became less dependent on water in the external environment. So try and remember that as well. 2 things, alternation of generations, less dependency on water in the external environment. So we're starting with the green alga, an alternation of generations. You can see this green alga in the Avon Heath Coast Estuary, McCormack's Bay. Sometimes you get huge blooms, not quite as big as this one, off the Chinese coast. So if you have lots of sex and you get lots of nutrients, that's what happens. Humanity's done that. You know, there are 8 billion of us. There's probably a few billion of those seaweeds in there as well. So you've got a gametophyte. And the gametophyte is haploid. It produces gametes. These gametes swim around actually in water. They find one another, they fertilize themselves, and produce a sporophyte. Now, in these simple algae, the sporophyte with 2 sets of chromosomes, it's diploid, it looks exactly the same as the gametophyte, but it's got 2 sets of chromosomes. So what does a sporophyte do? What does a sporophyte do? Sorry, don't all speak at once.
Create spores.
Yeah. Following meiosis. Good man. Meiosis, diploid to haploid. These are spores. They're called zoospores because they swim around. And the zoospores grow directly into a gametophyte. Haploid zoospore, haploid gametophyte. Now, the important thing is, all these stages depend on water. This is an aquatic alga. So the gametes swim around, find one another, fertilization, sporophyte. Zoospores swim around in the water, disperse themselves, form gametophytes. Alternation of generations. Simple. Wait until we get to the flowering plants, you'll be pulling your hair out. Right, okay. Algae to moss. These are land plants. They occur on land. But, okay, they produce spores and gametes. They've got an alternation of generations, but the gametes still need water for fertilisation. Next came the ferns. Evolution of big leaves for photosynthesis, capture all that sunlight. Roots going down into the soil, sucking up water and nutrients from the soil. Spores and gametes, but the gametes still require water for fertilisation. I'd love to tell you the life cycles of these, but we'd be here all night. Conifers, or so-called gymnosperms, conifers, yes, they produce spores and gametes. They've got roots and leaves, but they've evolved these wonderful structures called pollen and seeds. And no longer do they need water for fertilisation. So they can inhabit much drier regions over the planet's surface. Semi-arid regions, for instance, high mountain regions. And when you get to the flowering plants, similar theme. And in evolution, their reproductions become a lot more efficient because they've got these structures called flowers and structures called fruits. Flowering plants. Here's an example, a kowhai. Produces flowers, lovely flowers, things happen in the flowers. You produce a fruit, these pod-like structures, and the fruits in flowering plants, they're like containers with the seeds inside. Right. Okay, now on to the life cycle of a flowering plant. Now you're all interested in this because you've either got a back garden or you've got some ancient flowering plant in your apartment on the 20th floor penthouse flat. So you want to know what's going on in a flower. Now you're going to have to really concentrate now. Honest. So here's a flower. We're taking a lily as the example. Now a lily plant, plants that you see, are the sporophyte generation, diploid. So they've got chromosomes from parents, from a male and a female. Let's go into a flower. A flower has what you call male structures and female structures. The male structures are called anthers. Now these are going to be containers which form spores. The female structures, these in the middle here, stigma, style and ovary. Some of you will have done biology, won't you? You'll be familiar with these. Stigma, style and ovary. Here's an ovary. It's a container and it contains these structures called ovules. This is a cross-section through an ovary. These are ovules. These are going to become important. What do the anthers do? So we've got a diploid sporophyte, the flower, the plant. In the anthers you get meiosis. So the genes are all shuffled around and you get spores, single-celled spores form, lots and lots of them. What do those spores become? They become pollen grains. Now, a pollen grain is an immature male gametophyte. Remember the gametophyte of the alga? It was that big leafy green thing. This is a gametophyte, the same as an algal gametophyte, but it's microscopic. The males are microscopic. They couldn't do you any harm at all. Well, they could actually. Allergies, yeah, actually. Oh, well. So, pollen are immature male gametophytes. There's a pollen grain. What comes next? In the female parts, the ovary, inside the ovary, we've got ovules. There are cells in the ovules which undergo meiosis and form spores, which are haploid, one set of chromosomes. So in each ovule, you just get one single spore, one single haploid spore. And what does that grow into? It grows into a female gametophyte. So this is very different to that alga. The gametophyte was free living in the environment, floating around in the water. The gametophytes in flowering plants are dependent on the sporophyte, which nourishes them. They're sort of parasitic on the sporophyte, their parent. which nourishes them. So this female gametophyte is being nourished inside the ovule. It's very tiny, it's about 6 cells. And it contains an egg cell, as do all female gametophytes. What happens then? You get pollination. The pollen has got to be transferred to the female parts, usually on a different flower, but there are all sorts of variations, and it lands on the stigma. How does it get there? Co-evolution. Evolution is amazing. Flowers and various animals have evolved together. It's called co-evolution. The animals benefit from the nectar or from the pollen, eating those, and the flower benefits because the animals transfer the immature male gametophyte to the female parts of the plant. So what we got? Flies of some sort, butterflies on indigenous native New Zealand plants, a tui feeding on the nectar in a flax plant and getting the pollen deposited on top of its head, and then it goes to another flower and transfers that pollen to the female parts of that flower. And this is an example in Australia, a pygmy possum on a banksia, feeding on the nectar, but getting covered in pollen, and then running off to another banksia plant and depositing the pollen on the flowers. So pollination transfers the pollen to the stigma, and then the male really gets into itself and grows and grows and grows, but it's still pretty pathetic, really. And it grows this pollen tube, and it's being fed by the sporophyte. It needs sugars to do this, but it grows down the style, through the ovary wall, and penetrates into an ovule. There's the pollen tube, that blue thing there, and they've tried to show it here. Here's the pollen tube. And then the mature male consists of 3 cells, and 2 of them are sperm cells. So it's still very tiny. So there are 2 sperm cells there, and one of them fertilizes the egg cell, and the other one combines with 2 nuclei or 2 other cells of the female gametophyte. And this is called a triploid cell. It forms a triploid cell. It's got 3 sets of chromosomes, which is a bit odd. Read all about it afterwards. No time to explain in great detail. But here's the interesting bit. The ovule, following fertilization, becomes a seed. What is a seed? A seed is a complex structure. It consists of parts of 3 generations. Part of it is a seed coat, a protective seed coat, and that's from the parental sporophyte. It's the outer wall of the ovule. The embryo is going to grow into the next generation, and that is from the fertilized egg cell, becomes the embryo. And this triploid tissue, the other sperm cell and those other 2 cells of the female gametophyte, is food for the embryo when the seed germinates. So there's sort of 3 generations in the seed. Who would have thought that? And where do you find the seeds? Well, in flowering plants, remember, it's the flowering plants produce fruits. The ovary becomes a fruit. And inside the fruit, you've got the seeds. And you will have seen this numerous times, won't you? In the kitchen. Pea pods. A pea pod is a fruit. It's not a vegetable, it's a fruit. Isn't it? I'm getting confused now. I'm sure it is. A fruit, it contains seeds. The peas are the seeds. What is a seed? Well, I've just told you the 3 generations there. It's the same for a tomato. That's a berry, which is a fruit, and you can see the seeds inside. Same for a capsicum. Cut it in 2, you see all the seeds. The capsicum is the ovary, a swollen ovary. So, we're nearly there. You've got to disperse your fruit. So you grow somewhere else. You don't grow on the big toe of your parent. You grow somewhere else. So, and again, co-evolution. Evolution, making use, plants making use of animals, animals making use of plants. So the native poro has these wonderful yellowy orange fruits containing huge numbers of seeds, eaten by caribou. And that they get so fat, they eat about 200 of those fruit and they can hardly fly, but luckily they can just about fly 10 metres, digest the fruit, all the seeds survive going through the gut, come out the other end, splat, lots of nutrients, a bit of water if it rains, and then they germinate. That's one example. Hundreds of different variations on this theme. At the other end of the scale, let's say you've got a dandelion. Here's a dandelion. A dandelion flower is in fact hundreds of flowers all packed together. And each one forms a single fruit. Well, the whole thing's the fruit. And there's a seed at the end there inside the fruit. And of course, these are wind-blown. So wind dispersal of the fruits. Just two examples of hundreds, thousands of different variations of the theme. The seeds are dispersed, the seeds germinate. So the embryo inside the seed makes use of the nourishment. It's not in the light yet, it can't photosynthesize. Then the leaf comes above the ground, it photosynthesizes. A little acorn grows into an oak tree. The next sporophyte generation. So that's the flowering plant. Now, just to get it in your minds, I thought if I've got time, I'll translate it into what we'd be like if we were plants. So, do you want to be it?
I think so.
You might want to be it. Let's start with it. So that's the diploid plant with the flower on it. And you, if you're it, you're going to form spores. You're going to form male and female spores in structures which are stuck to you. And these are going to... So the male spore forms an immature male gametophyte. It's still stuck to you in this little sac. And the female gametophyte's in a sac, stuck to you somewhere. And then the immature male gametophyte is going to be released and it's got to get to you. So let's bring in a buzzy bee. Picks you up. If you want to be the immature male gametophyte, you get quite a thrill hanging below the bumblebee. Transfers you to the female, and then you mature. And the lucky old male, when he matures, he forms this huge long tube which snakes down and it penetrates the ovary, and it penetrates the ovule, and it penetrates the female gametophyte. It finds an egg cell, and one of the sperm cells fertilizes the egg, and the other sperm cell fertilizes those another two cells inside you. And that, of course, is going to become the seed. A seed in a fruit. And that's it for the male. It's done its thing. Just disintegrates, disappears. And then, of course, we've got to disperse the fruit. So along comes Clucky the parrot. Eats your fruit, your yum, flies away. The seed has evolved to survive passage through the gut. What a wonderful life. Completely different sort of environment. Through the gut, splat, and you know what happens next. Germinates, and lo and behold, kiddick grows up and begins to swallow. So that's it. Take your choice, you could get one of any of those. So some people love it. Kids in schools get magnifying, go, what's going on down there? And dogs like the smell. Last slide. Tough. What have we got here? Right, here we go. What's this? It's a fruit. You said a fruit. You're wonderful. It is a fruit. It's not the whole fruit because, of course, when they sell them in the shops, they've taken off all the fibrous outer material. But this hard woody thing is the fruit wall. And there's a single huge seed inside. And this is adapted to float on the ocean, on the Pacific Ocean, and then land on a sandy beach and grow into another coconut tree. Well done. I didn't think you'd get that one. Now this one's going to be tricky, I think. I didn't bring the whole box of them, $10. I didn't want to waste it. So this is a $2 strawberry. Yeah, strawberry. What is a strawberry?
Not a fruit.
It's a fruit, did you say?
Is it not a fruit?
It's not a fruit.
A berry.
It's a berry. A strawberry. It's not a berry, although it's called a strawberry. It's not a berry. It is a swollen receptacle. A receptacle is the tip of the stem which bears the flower. So the tip of the stem has swollen into that red thing, and there are lots of tiny little fruits all over it, in little pits all over. So it's a swollen receptacle which has had lots of small flowers all over it, I think. And each of those has formed a fruit. I'll have to look that one up. I know it's a swollen receptacle. This one will fool you. An onion. What is an onion? Anything to do with sexual reproduction in plants. It's a... Sorry?
A seed.
A seed. Well, it's a good guess, but you're wrong. It's a very short stem with fleshy leaves around it. So it's a vegetative structure. Cut it. I'm sure you'll have cut an onion in half, but you haven't looked at it, have you? It's leaf after leaf after leaf, fleshy leaf. So you disappointed me there. My favourite chocolate, dark gone.
Salad.
What's it?
Salad.
Anything?
Fruit salad.
Sorry?
It's a fruit salad.
A fruit salad. Good one. That's the best one of the night. Cocoa. Cocoa is made from the seeds of the cacao plant, the ground up seeds. So definitely something to do with sex in plants in that one. Now this one is extremely tricky. A banana.
Doesn't it have little seeds right in the middle?
That's a berry.
Does it? One question: does it have a little seed in the middle? Another comment: it's a berry. It's not a berry. It is a fruit. It's an advanced alga, a highly evolved alga. That's what I call all flowering plants, advanced algae. It is a fruit, but it's sterile. Cavendish bananas, our commercial bananas, I had to read up about this yesterday. They reckon they formed about 7,000 years ago when two wild banana species hybridized. And one of them had 4 sets of chromosomes, the other had 2 sets of chromosomes. And they produced a triploid plant with 3 sets of chromosomes. And plants with 3 sets of chromosomes can't undergo meiosis. So it can't form seeds. It can't form viable seeds, but it still develops fruit. But they're under threat from virus and fungal diseases because they've lost their diversity. And these are grown in plantations in huge numbers worldwide, but they're under threat because their genetic diversity is so narrow.
What about other types, like the ladyfinger?
What is the ladyfinger?
We don't get them here, but in China and places, little hairy white bananas.
Oh, bananas. Oh, okay. Other bananas. I did read about. Well, wild bananas do form seeds. Not these commercial varieties. And they form really hard, stony seeds which fill the whole fruit. Whereas this type of banana, the edible one, apparently it was discovered about 7,000 years ago in Papua New Guinea. And it came from there and spread around the world. So, we've got the Papua New Guineans to thank for the Cavendish banana. I get all mine from the shop on Colombo Street. I've been going there about 30 years. I've been going there, and they never cost more than $2 for about 10 bananas. It's a great place.
Hey.
Thank you very much. I think you're very knowledgeable. Thank you.
One or two questions on that?
We've had a few. So.
How do these sterile bananas reproduce it? Have they got a seed component somewhere else in the plant?
They have to reproduce in what we call vegetatively. So a banana plant, it's got an underground stem, which is called a rhizome. So you can take this underground stem and chop it up, and each bit you can plant into the soil, and you get a new banana plant. So it's quite simple, apparently. And we're growing more and more in New Zealand, of course, as the temperature goes up. So eventually we'll be growing them in Invercargill. Give it another 10 years. It might be underwater, but be warm enough to grow bananas.
I didn't have a question, I have a
Oh.
different